My father died on a Tuesday in November. The kind of cold grey morning where the sky looks like it has already given up. I was 16 years old. I remember standing at the kitchen sink when my aunt called, watching steam rise from a mug of coffee I had made for myself because my mother was still sleeping. I remember the exact sound the mug made when I set it down. A small click against the counter. Then silence. The kind of silence that does not end. My father's name was Robert. He was a quiet man who repaired watches for a living, which I always thought said something about him. He believed broken things could be fixed if you were patient enough, if your hands were steady enough, if you cared enough to try. He kept a small workshop in the garage, smelling of machine oil and cedar. And sometimes I would sit on the stool beside him after school and just watch him work without either of us needing to say anything. That was enough. That was everything. When he died of a heart attack at 44, I lost the only person in my family who had ever made me feel like I belonged somewhere. My mother was not a bad woman. I want to be fair about that, because fairness was something my father taught me. She was a frightened woman, and frightened people sometimes do terrible things in the name of survival. Within 3 months of my father's death, she had moved her sister Karen and Karen's husband Dale into our house. She told me they were helping with expenses. She told me family sticks together in hard times. She smiled when she said it. I smiled back. I did not yet understand what was coming. The first of the month arrived, and my mother sat me down at the kitchen table where my father used to read the paper. She folded her hands the way she did when she had already decided something and was only explaining it afterward. You are going to need to contribute, she said. $400 a month. Rent for your room. I was 16 years old. My father had been dead for 93 days. I did not cry. I sat there and looked at the table and thought about the watch my father had been repairing the week before he died. A gold pocket watch belonging to an old man downtown. It was still sitting in the workshop. No one had returned it. No one had even mentioned it. That detail seemed important to me in a way I could not explain. I nodded and said I would figure it out. Karen and Dale did not pay rent. I noticed that immediately. Karen's children, my cousins Brent and Misty, had bedrooms down the hall and contributed nothing. Dale spent his afternoons watching television in the living room that had been my father's. The house was full of people who belonged there, and I was the one paying to stay. I got a job at a grocery store stocking shelves before school. Then a second job on weekends at a hardware store. I gave my mother $400 every first of the month, and I never missed a payment. I told myself this was temporary. I told myself I was learning something. I did not yet know how right I was. What nobody understood about me, what they never bothered to find out because they were not paying attention, was that my father had taught me more than patience during those hours in the garage. He had taught me about money. Not the way schools teach it, not the way television teaches it. The real way. the quiet way. He would pull out his ledger sometimes, a small green notebook he kept in the drawer beside the socket wrenches, and show me his accounts. Every dollar that came in, every dollar that went out, every dollar that was saved, and what it was saved for. He did not talk about it much. He just showed me. He believed demonstration was worth more than instruction. When I was 12, he opened a savings account in my name at the credit union downtown and deposited $40. He told me the number would grow if I left it alone. He told me compound interest was the closest thing to magic that actually existed in the world. Then he showed me the math. I never forgot it. By the time my father died, that account had grown to $417, plus 4 years of watching and listening and understanding things a child should not have to understand about how money moves and where it goes, and why some people always seem to have it, while others always seem to be one emergency away from nothing. 16 years old, working 2 jobs, paying rent to my own mother in my own childhood home, I put everything I could into that savings account. Not because I had a plan yet, but because my father had taught me that saving was a form of faith. You saved because you believed the future was worth preparing for, even when the present gave you no reason to believe in anything at all. I graduated from high school a semester early. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I applied to schools far enough away that I could not come back easily, which was not cruelty, but self-preservation. I won a partial scholarship to a state university 3 hours north. My mother did not drive me there. Karen and Dale threw a small party for Brent that same weekend because he had passed his driving test. I loaded my car by myself and left before noon. Nobody waved goodbye. I remember looking in my rearview mirror, and the front door was already closed. I will not pretend the next years were easy, because they were not. I worked every semester. I lived in the cheapest housing I could find. I ate simply and slept less than I should have. But I studied finance because it was the thing that made the most sense to me. The thing that felt most like sitting beside my father in the garage, watching something mechanical and logical and honest do exactly what it was designed to do. By the time I graduated, I had no debt. Not because my family helped me, because I had never stopped saving. Because every dollar I kept was a dollar that compounded. Because my father had been right about the magic. I graduated on a Saturday in May. Bright sky, green campus, people taking photographs. I had no family in the crowd. I sat in the folding chair with my name on a slip of paper inside the program, and when they called my name, I walked across the stage and shook hands with a dean I had never met, and thought about a green notebook in a garage drawer, and a man who repaired broken things because he believed they were worth fixing. I did not cry there either. I saved it for the drive home. The job came quickly because I had been looking for a long time before I was ready. Entry level at a small investment firm. Then a better position. Then better still. I was not brilliant. I was disciplined, which is worth more than brilliance over long periods of time. I understood risk because I had lived inside it. I understood patience because I had grown up watching hands that never rushed. I understood that money was not the point, but that money was the tool that made every other point possible. I did not speak to my mother for 2 years after I left for college. Not out of anger, though the anger was there, but because I needed to become someone before I could go back. Because I knew if I returned too soon, I would shrink back into the person they had decided I was. The child who owed something. The child who needed to earn her place. I was not going to be that person anymore. When I did call her, my voice was steady. I asked how she was. She said fine. I asked about the house. She said fine. I asked nothing about Karen and Dale because I did not care about Karen and Dale. We talked for 12 minutes and it was polite and hollow. And when I hung up, I felt nothing, which was different from feeling sad, which was progress. Over the next several years, I built something, quietly, without announcing it. I made investments with care and patience. I studied markets the way my father had studied watches, looking for the place where a small, precise adjustment could make a broken thing run again. I made mistakes, and I learned from them without drama, because drama was expensive, and I did not waste resources. I invested in real estate. First, a single-family home in a mid-sized city, then a duplex, then a small apartment building. I reinvested. I compounded. I did not rush. I did not tell my family any of this. There was nothing to tell yet. And besides, they had not asked. My mother and I had arrived at a careful, distant arrangement, a phone call every few weeks, pleasantries exchanged like currency neither of us needed. She mentioned Karen and Dale often. She mentioned Brent's new truck. She mentioned Misty's wedding. She did not ask what I was doing. I did not volunteer it. I kept the green notebook current in my mind. Every dollar coming in and going out and growing in the spaces between. I was 31 when things began to shift in my family's house. I heard it in my mother's voice first, a tightness she tried to hide, a pause before she answered simple questions. I asked about the mortgage once, and she changed the subject with a speed that told me everything. Karen and Dale were still there. I suspected they had never left. I suspected things had never been as stable as the picture my mother had always tried to present. I hired a researcher, a quiet, methodical woman with a background in title searches and financial records. I gave her the address of the house I had grown up in. I asked her to find out everything. Not because I wanted to feel powerful, not because I was planning revenge, but because I needed to understand the terrain before I walked back into it. Because I had learned by then that information was not aggression. It was preparation. The report she gave me 2 weeks later was 37 pages long. I read it in one sitting at my kitchen table on a Sunday morning, with coffee going cold beside me. The house had been refinanced 3 times in 11 years. The equity my father had spent 22 years building had been extracted and spent. Karen and Dale had borrowed money against the property without my mother's full understanding of what she was signing, using her trust and her fear and her loneliness as instruments. There was a second mortgage, then a third, restructured. The payments had fallen behind. The bank had sent notices. Foreclosure proceedings had quietly begun. I closed the folder and looked out the window for a long time. I thought about my father. I thought about the day he showed me the difference between an asset and a liability. I thought about the $400 a month I had paid to sleep in my childhood bedroom, while Dale watched television in my father's living room. I thought about compound interest and patience and broken things, and whether they could be fixed if you cared enough. Then I thought about what it would cost to buy that bank, not the specific bank that held the mortgage. That was not the point, and I am being precise with language, because precision matters. But I thought about how money worked, how institutions worked, how the people who owned the instruments had a different relationship to outcomes than the people who owed on them. And I thought about a community bank I had been watching for a year, a small regional institution with good fundamentals and a board that was tired, and a price that made sense. I had been circling it slowly, the way my father circled a watch he intended to bid on, patient, informed, unhurried. I made the acquisition 3 months later. It was not a dramatic transaction. It was a careful one. The due diligence took 8 weeks. The financing structure took another 3. On the day the papers were signed, I sat in a conference room in a city 60 miles from where I grew up and shook hands with people who did not know my name 6 years earlier. And I thought about a woman paying rent at 16, and I smiled a small private smile that no one in that room understood. I was now, among other things, a majority stakeholder in the financial institution that held the mortgage on my mother's house. I want to be clear about what I did with that. I did not foreclose. I did not accelerate the timeline or manufacture suffering. I am not that person. My father did not raise that person. What I did was spend 2 weeks reviewing the loan file carefully with my team, understanding exactly what had happened to that property and that family over 11 years. And then I decided what kind of reckoning looked like something my father would have recognized as fair. I called my mother on a Wednesday evening in October. Normal time, normal greeting. The tightness in her voice was louder now, barely covered. I asked her how things were. She said fine. I asked about the house again. This time, she did not change the subject fast enough. There was a pause, longer than she intended, and then something broke slightly in her voice. "We are having some difficulty," she said, "with the payments." "I know," I said. Silence. "How do you know?" she asked. I told her. Not everything, not all at once, because cruelty is efficient and I was not trying to be cruel. I was trying to be true. I told her I had been watching things for a while. I told her I had the report. I told her I understood what had happened with the refinancing, and with Karen and Dale, and with the choices that had been made over a decade out of fear and loneliness and misplaced trust. She was quiet for a very long time. "Eleanor," she said finally, using my full name, which she only did when something had broken through the surface. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to ask you some questions," I said, "and then I'm going to tell you what your options are. But first, I need you to tell me the truth about what happened in that house. All of it. From the beginning. Not the version you told yourself. The real one." She told me. It took 2 hours, and most of it I already knew from the report, and the rest of it I had suspected. Karen and Dale had convinced her the refinancing was a good idea. They had told her it would free up cash for repairs and emergencies. They had handled the paperwork because she had been too tired and too sad to do it herself. The money had gone places she did not fully understand. She had trusted because she did not know what else to do. She had been afraid because she had been alone since my father died, and fear makes people sign things they should not sign. "What about me?" I said. "What about the $400 a month?" Another long silence. Then, quietly, "Karen said it was important. She said it would teach you responsibility. She said your father would have wanted it." "My father," I said, "would have wanted no such thing." "I know that," my mother whispered. "I think I knew it then." We were both quiet for a moment, sitting inside a truth that had been waiting 11 years to be said out loud. "Here is what happens next," I told her. "Karen and Dale are going to leave that house, not because I am forcing them, because you are going to ask them to leave. And if they do not leave, you are going to understand exactly what your rights are, and you are going to exercise them. I will help you with that. Second, the mortgage situation is going to be restructured in a way that is manageable. You do not need to understand everything about how that happens. You need to trust me, which I understand is a complicated thing to ask, but I am asking it." "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "After everything." "Because he would have," I said. "And I am not done being his daughter." I heard her begin to cry softly. Not the crying of someone performing emotion. The crying of someone who has been carrying something too heavy for too long and has finally been told they can set it down. The next 6 weeks were not simple. Karen did not leave quietly. She made calls. She told people I was trying to destroy the family. She told my mother I was controlling and vindictive, and that money had changed me. Dale sent me a long email full of grievances about the hard work they had done maintaining the house, which was not supported by anything in the property records. Their lawyer sent a letter. My lawyer sent a better one. On the 15th of November, Karen and Dale moved out of the house where I had paid rent at 16. They moved into an apartment in a complex 3 miles away. I know this because I drove past it once on a gray afternoon and thought about nothing in particular. That was enough. I did not need more from that moment. My mother stayed in the house. The mortgage was restructured through a legal process that I had no inappropriate involvement in, handled at arm's length by people I trusted and subject to proper oversight. I paid off the remaining balance myself, not as a secret, not as a surprise, but as a clear, explicit transaction that I explained to my mother in full, because she deserved to understand every dollar. The title transferred cleanly. No more liens, no more second mortgages, no more fear hiding inside the fine print. She called me the morning the paperwork was finished. "Eleanor," she said, "I know what I did. When you were 16, I know what I allowed. I have been carrying that." "I know you have," I said. "Can you forgive me?" I sat with that question the way my father sat with a watch he was not sure he could fix. Turning it in my hands, looking at each component honestly, deciding what it needed. "I love you," I said finally, "and I am not done being angry. But I think Dad believed that broken things could be fixed, and I think he would want me to try." She did not say anything for a moment. Then, "He would have been so proud of you." "I think he already was," I said. "I think that is why he gave me the notebook." I did not sleep well that night, not from pain, but from the strange, disorienting feeling of having arrived somewhere you have been walking toward for a very long time without knowing the address. The house my father had spent 22 years building had been rescued, not dramatically, not with speeches or confrontations or gestures, with a ledger, with patience, with compound interest, with steady hands and a clear head, and the willingness to do the work over a long enough period of time that the outcome was inevitable. I visited the house for the first time in many years on a Saturday in December. The yard was different. Some trees gone, new ones planted. The garage looked smaller than I remembered. My mother met me at the door and hugged me longer than she had since I was a child. The house smelled like coffee and something baking. It smelled like something that had been through a hard winter and survived it. I walked through the rooms quietly. I stood in the kitchen, where I had learned I would have to pay rent. I stood in the hallway, where Karen's children's photographs used to hang. I stood in the doorway of my old bedroom, smaller than memory. The afternoon light coming through the window at the same angle it always had. Then I walked to the garage. My father's workshop was still there, old, dusty, reorganized by years of other uses, but there. The stool was still by the bench. The drawer was still in the same place. I opened it, and the green notebook was there, still there after all of it, slightly yellowed, the cover soft with age. I picked it up and held it, and did not cry. I had already done the crying. This was something else. This was the moment my father had been preparing me for, without either of us knowing it. Every dollar written in those columns, every lesson given in silence beside a workbench, every watch repaired, because broken things deserve careful hands. Some people are given everything and do nothing with it. Some people are given nothing and build something anyway. I was given a notebook and a lesson in compound interest, and a man who believed patience was the most powerful force in the world. And I carried those things out of a house where I paid rent at 16, and I carried them forward for 15 years, and I never put them down. That is the story. Not a story about revenge, about reckoning. Not a story about money, about what money represents when it is built honestly and slowly, and with your father's voice in your head saying the future is worth preparing for. The house is mine now, legally, the way it should have always been. But more than that, the house is my mother's, the way my father always intended. And somewhere in whatever comes next, I think he already knows how it turned out. I think he would recognize the handwriting in the ledger. I think he would nod once, the way he nodded when a watch started running again, quiet and satisfied, and not surprised at all. Broken things can be fixed if you are patient enough, if your hands are steady enough, if you care enough to try. I am my father's daughter. I always was.